like to call to order this special meeting of the Clearwater City Council. Is there, to my extreme right is our Deputy City Manager Jill Silverboard, our City Manager Bill Horn, our Council Member Bob Cundiff, and Council Member Jay Poglaze.
Hello.
To my left, Council Member David Albritton.
Good afternoon.
Council Member Hoyt Hamilton.
Good afternoon.
Our City Attorney Pam Aiken. And our City Clerk Rosemary Call.
Hello.
Is there anybody on the public wishing to speak to an item that is not on the agenda? If so, please come forward at this time. You would have 3 minutes to speak. Otherwise, we'll move forward to agenda item 3.1. Mr. Horn.
Mayor, thank you very much. Consistent with City Council Policy 12.3, which really outlines why we're here this afternoon, it states that prior to June 1 of each year and prior to the development of the city manager's proposed budget, the City Council shall meet in a strategic planning session to review the 5-year financial forecast and update as necessary the city's vision, mission, and strategic direction. From these documents, a 5-year strategic plan will be updated. Council, as you can see on our agenda, we have a number of topics that have a very direct strategic connection to the kind of direction that we have been following now for some time. And so with that in mind, I'm going to ask our Deputy City Manager, Jill Silverboard, to get us started in our review.
Mayor and Council, good afternoon. I will just begin where the City Manager introduced the strategic vision, mission, and direction. This goes back to 2013, when City Council established the series that you see on the screen and that was provided in your backup. This is also the document that we use in your budget document each year and have used for the intervening years. You have in your backup a deconstructed version of this document so that you can review the statements for the vision, the mission, and then as we go into each of the strategic objectives. We also outline in your backup, as we do each year, a variety of ongoing strategic actions. We have a variety of plans and documents that we believe align the ongoing work of the city to the strategic direction. There's a comprehensive list of those in your backup. And we know that those plans and initiatives reinforce your identification of the objectives for facilitating the development of the economy and for providing cost-effective municipal services and infrastructure. For this afternoon, benefit of this item, in Part B of your backup item, we have provided you for each of the 8 strategic objectives several focus items that we've identified for 2019, 2020. And the boxes are color coordinated. If you're looking at it in color, they match the color of the strategic objective box. And so we've outlined those as simply being reflective of the things we understand to be priorities for the coming year. And our focus, of course, on some of these will be highlighted in your items that are coming up this afternoon. Others are just simply a reminder. For example, we have a biennial citizen survey coming up. That's getting ready to start, and so that's a way in which you gauge the public's satisfaction with the job we're doing, consistent with these objectives. And you obviously will be talking about, as I said, several others that are coming up. So our first item really is to see if you have anything you wish to add to those focus items. Did we miss something? Is there something that's on your mind you'd like to see us add for focus purposes for the coming fiscal year?
Council, any comments for Ms. Silverboard?
I think we're
An aggressive schedule?
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
And also just always like to highlight as part of this item that these are more of your priority focus items for the year. They are in no way reflective of the entire work program for any department or any particular function. We do many things every day of the year for the citizens and the community and the services we provide that support these objectives as well, but they may not be highlighted, but there's a lot more work that goes on. So we just like to remind you of that. And if you have anything that you wish to add as we go through the rest of the afternoon, we can make that note as we go along as well.
Okay.
Thank you, Mayor.
Okay, next we're going to have Mr. Delk is going to talk about the Second Century Strategic Project Plan. If you recall, he indicated that he was going to talk to you a little bit about Imagine Clearwater as well. So,
Mr. Delk, continue on, Mr. Horn.
Yes, there's no motion.
Excuse me, Mayor. I had a comment to make on the agenda item that's finished.
There's no
motion on the
There's no
floor.
motion.
Or you
Is
just,
it a public meeting? Do you not want to?
There's no motion, Mr. Johnson. This is considered a work discussion item of the council. If there were a motion for you to speak on, we would obviously give you an opportunity to speak. But there's no motion. Am I not correct?
I don't believe so. I believe it was.
Was there a motion, Mr. Johnson? Was
You
there a
asked
mo-
if I believe was correct. You're
Was there a
correct.
motion, Mr.
The
Johnson?
policy item is for you to hold.
Mr. Johnson, was there a motion for you
No,
to,
there should have been.
but there wasn't, because we don't have to approve
You're
it.
not accepting of policy. You're not accepting.
Mr. Horn, please continue.
Mr. Delk?
Michael Delk, Interim Assistant City Manager. I want to talk about Imagine Clearwater and well, in anticipation of a little different track and approach to our discussion about this project. So as of this morning, I completed my fifth meeting with Councilman Albritton. And so very quickly since then, I've tried to put together some of my thoughts and we'll have some recommendations to you regarding this project. But so what I'd like to try to quickly do here is to go through this project. One is, I think that I would like to change a little bit of our discussion about this project. I think it's to work on one of the most large, extensive, and exciting projects. I think we need to be and can be very enthusiastic about the changes that we're proposing to make and the investment in our community. And so I really think that we, hopefully, I can assist in that to try to change the tone and the direction a little bit of what we're trying to accomplish with this project. So with that, I would like to tell you some things that I've been thinking about that will serve to possibly guide me and guide us as we reevaluate this process. And one is, I think it's important for us to reestablish the priorities and an energy for the Imagine Clearwater project. I think all of these things are very important and seminal to the city's future. They represent drastic investment on our part that can shape our community for the coming 100 years, and that's where the Second Century Clearwater came from. I think, as we all know, we're going to continue to need support from our community with regard to successful referendums. We've had a pretty good track record of late. I think we should be very proud of that. But I think we need to remain cognizant of the fact as we go through this planning process and what we're doing to build the front of the waterfront of the park, that we are still going to have to go back to our community for successful referendums in order for us to be able to accomplish everything that we want to accomplish. And so for that reason, I think it's very important that we continue constructive engagement with our community, that we make them feel as though they are important participants in this process as they have been from the beginning. I think we need to fully evaluate our primary properties and assets prior to further demolitions, and I'll talk about that in just a moment a little bit more. Develop components for phasing and estimates for key improvements. I think, we're all aware of the large numbers that have been thrown out there with regard to what our investment in the waterfront is going to be. I think we all agree that we don't want to try to juggle one ball at a time. We want to have multiple initiatives out there for this project. So I think to the extent that we can have a serious discussion with you over how we might approach the implementation of this and the construction of this park and these related facilities, that we can expand our horizons and really effectively use our budgeting resources to move various components of the project along. I want to really reach out and engage more of the responsible departments for various components of the plan. That includes finance, parks and recreation, the library, marina, CRA, and others. I think, you know, there's a misconception that may be out there in some circles that this success or failure can rise or fall on one individual or one party, or certainly that we can do it all from the city manager's office. I think none of those things are true. We need a team of department heads that's going to assist us and be engaged in this process along with the rest of us. So one thing here I want to emphasize, I think those of you who've known me for a number of years, how diligently I try to achieve consensus on major projects that I bring forward. I want to say here, I think that maybe this is a time for us to consider that action is more critical than consensus. I think as we consider this project, I think it's easy to get sidetracked on the silver bullets or the magic wand approach, that there is one best way that we can be successful and that is the way we need to pursue. And the reality is there are no silver bullets, there are no magic wands, and there's no one best way. So it's my intention to make very specific recommendations to you on occasion for things that I believe strongly in. I'll be telling you why I believe those things are important, and I understand fully that you may or may completely agree or disagree. At which case, we'll get a majority vote and then we'll move forward with however you want to. But I think it's important for us to fight over this ground once and then move on and try to get to the action stage, assuming that we won't necessarily all agree on every component. So with regard to that, I think one of the things that I think we should keep in mind, and this is kind of a philosophy or approach that I intend to bring to the discussion, is that we do not need to search for a silver bullet or the one right way to do something, but rather commit to reasonable and responsible actions that focus on our priority objective of creating value to the residents of Clearwater and to create a great public place and to encourage private sector redevelopment and investment in our community, and affecting positively the public realm for which we retain control and responsibility. And I think by that I mean that, we cannot control entirely private sector investment in our community, but what we can control is the public realm. We have great opportunity with that. We need to take advantage of the things that we can control and not worry so much about the things that we cannot control. So with regard to that, I'm going to be making some priority recommendations for you. But what I'd like to focus on first is the primary focus areas. So I think we should immediately, and frankly, I've already kind of started doing some of this work, having conversations with the relevant department heads, but move forward with the library enhancement. We've got a project, some really notable improvements to the library, enhancing that facility. I've talked to the Jen in the library, who's excited about bringing some of those things forward. So we've already set up a meeting with the consultants who aided us in that project, and we're going to kind of revisit this and refresh this work, and then at some point here in the very near future, we'll schedule an opportunity to bring it forward to you with some more specific plans and recommendations. I've initiated some discussion on the lighting of the Memorial Causeway Bridge. This could be one of the most iconic views on the west coast of Florida, I think, if we can ever be successful in actually lighting this bridge. It'll be a very photo op for the community. And I think it may be a challenge dealing with District 7 and DOT, as it always is, but we're talking to some folks that I think can help us dust this one off and get it back on track, hopefully. One of the things that I want to talk to you about in more detail at some point is revisit some of the phasing of the waterfront redevelopment. I think we ought to consider breaking out some of the component building sites. That will help us. A couple of things it'll do is I think it'll help us move forward with some of the basic design and development of the green space, the park itself. I think it will help us we can create building sites for future improvements. It'll help us divide up the funding obligations so that we can maybe tackle some things sooner rather than later. I think it can forestall some of the battles we do not yet need to engage in with regard to the final design of the bridge, the canopy, or all of the back of house, for example, for the venue. One thing I want to say about that is that we've had some criticism. I think that the public feels that we've changed the plan. I think we've talked about this individually. I'd like to publicly state that that really the stage as envisioned by HRNA and Sasaki has always been a fully developed stage and covering facility, such that there was never a plan that we would have to bring in new staging to have all of our events. So the plan has anticipated that. It is not a change in the plan. And so I think if we're going to be subjected to some criticism about whether people think we changed the plan or not, we just need to make it so that the criticism is for the right thing, not the wrong thing. I think your decision, which we are not revisiting, for the back of house and the covered seating, if somebody wants to be concerned about that, I think that's where their focus should be. It should not be on the fact that we're going to build a stage that meets all of our needs. That has always been a part of the plan. Related to that, I have talked to Hamid with Stantec. I think that if we can balance a combination of phasing and bringing a construction manager on board, then I think there's a possibility that we can move some of the basic infrastructure of the park forward sooner rather than later. I think we all share a desire to try to move things along as quickly as possible. So there are some primary focus areas, and I'll be a little bit more specific now. I think one area is the North Marina. I don't think I can overestimate to you the potential that I think we're getting ready to realize in the North Marina area. I really get a strong sense of what this corridor can be. We've got a lot of key projects developing for it. So what I would suggest is that as we move forward with more detailed budgeting and department discussions, that we talk about emphasizing continuing the North Marina project. I think we've incurred probably the largest single expense item, which is the rebuilding of the ramp area and all of those parking lots and all that improvement. So I think maybe the next bite at the apple is a little bit easier to swallow, and that is dealing with some of the trails and the more neighborhood improvements. North Osceola, Nicholson, North Fort Harrison. This is a great time with us to follow forward with the detailed planning for complete street for Fort Harrison. We have a grant that we've received for that work initially, and in the planning and development department budget, I actually had put in there before my move over here some funding for the next phase of that study and design for that Fort Harrison. In fact, it should include some of the trail improvements as well that were in the North Marina Master Plan. The North Ward School, I'm going to recommend to, in fact, I'll throw this in. This is a good time to talk about this. I think my recommendation to you would be that we forestall for a time the demolition and removal of the City Hall building. I think we have an opportunity with three key assets that we have right now to really evaluate what their potential value to us is as a community. That is the North Ward School, the City Hall building, and the Fire Station 45. So I want to talk to you maybe a little bit more detail in the next short period of time about maybe an architectural review of these facilities to really see what we have in terms of the value of those assets to us before we tear them down and remove them from the city. I think there's some real opportunity about that. I won't go into much more detail than that today, but I'll be happy to do that with you in the future if that is helpful. North Fort Harrison, streetscaping, the complete street process. Again, I think people often talk to us about downtown St. Petersburg and Dunedin and how great those downtowns are. I think if you think about it, Fort Harrison, North Fort Harrison, the immediate north downtown and all the way up to the Myrtle intersection is really prime for us to have as a small walkable area of our community that is full of neighborhood and local businesses. So And that can be a flame that can really take off and benefit our entire downtown. The downtown gateway, I don't want to forget about the area to our east. I think we need to, one, stay committed to Cleveland, Gulf to Bay Street, that reconfiguration. I know there's been some issues that have kind of set us back on that for a short period of time, but I think we need to keep that hopefully in focus. And also the opportunity for the Mercado in the downtown gateway area. So I guess at this point, moving forward our next round of discussion, I would like to make the following recommendations to you, and that is that we attempt to do our best to pursue the permit for the causeway lighting and the funding options to make that available in the near future. That we discuss in more detail some specific staging of constructional components of the Imagine Clearwater plan, and consider moving forward with a construction manager in the Park and Gateway Plaza area in the near term. I think would like to recommend that we issue an RFP for the Harbor View mixed use site as soon as possible, and that we target a 2020 referendum for that property as well. That's going to be an aggressive schedule. But I think if we are diligent about that, we can possibly make that happen. I think we ought to double down on the success that we're seeing in the North Fort Harrison area and the Seminole Ramp area, and try to complete as quickly as possible the complete street planning for the Fort Harrison corridor. This is an economic game changer for us. Would like to initiate the design phase of North Marina Master Plan Phase 2 simply because it relates to the Fort Harrison improvements and the grant that we're getting, the work we're doing there. And I think it will continue to build on the momentum that we're seeing. And lastly, the initiated adaptive reuse study of the key asset facilities, and that's the North Ward School, the City Hall site, and the Fire Station 45. I think one of the easiest things we can do if we conclude that that's in our best interest is to tear these buildings down. The more challenging question for us is to make sure that we, what asset value they may have to us before we do. So with that, I think the next step for us is for you to consider some of these recommendations, and that we prepare an upcoming more detailed discussion with you to focus on priority projects and how we incorporate them into our 1920 budget. And I think due to the fact that it'll be here before we know it, the 2021 budget for some of these initiatives, and our time will be spent trying to move them along. That's it.
Okay. Council, I was reminded that the purpose of this meeting initially was to be a work session. And we added to it the pay schedule because that was something that was to be voted on, and we needed to have a motion, on that. These others are just reports that are being presented to us, and that's the format that we're using to follow. So if it was, somebody got an opinion otherwise, I apologize for that, but these are just reports that are being presented to us. If you have some comments that you want to make to the, on the reports to provide to the staff, we're free to do that. But the only motion that we're going to be considering today is on the pay schedule.
One question on that report, Mayor.
Yeah.
Thank you.
For Mr. Dell?
It is.
Yeah.
Thank you. Mr. Depp, you were talking about some of the positive things that are happening up in the North Marina. I'm aware of one and of course the Summit Boat Dock project. Are there other things going on besides the one condo development up there that we need to be aware of? I mean, it's good news. I'd like to hear about it.
We had the little microbrewery open up over the past weekend. I think there's some others that are looking at that area. These folks tend to like to operate. They're like car dealerships in a way. They like to locate relative to one another. They feed off of that momentum and that energy. So, I've had a little bit of conversation earlier today, actually, with our economic development folks that, as we complete kind of the planning side of that equation, what can we do to try to, turn the heat up on the economic development side of it. And so we've had some proposals, people talking about residential infill. I think, there's been some very good positive discussions with some good developers who deliver on those things that I think we need to kind of build on. That can be one of our primary classic urban corridors.
No, that is good news. Could you give me an update on the condo project that's going up there? How many units, how many stories? Because I think Mr. Andrews has a project.
The second one I don't remember. The one that is right around the marina, Gina, maybe you do, was 80 units. I believe that he's in the phase of trying to sell the units in order to get the financing. That's not unusual. I don't recall the second project.
So I wasn't even.
Seems like it's something over 100, a little bit bigger, but I could be
I
wrong
wasn't aware
about
there
that.
were two
The first one was 80
projects.
units.
Yeah, that is good news. Thank you.
Mr. Albritton?
Yes, the RFP you were talking about for Imagine Clearwater for the property between the library and Harborview, how long do you think that'll take to put that together and get out?
Well, I think we have to do it by summertime if we're going to, is that correct, Pam? I mean, to get it out in time for
We
March?
haven't really discussed the necessary scheduling, but we do have to move quickly. And then we'll discuss what the referendum questions need to look like, because there are some alternatives. So they're kind of mutually dependent. So we'll be discussing that very soon.
So the RFP itself, is that going to be just on a description, or are we going to get those ideas and base the referendum on that, specifics?
Well, I think my tendency probably is to be a little more generalized in that. I think the city attorney's approach is to be much more specific about that. So somewhere in those two, the middle of those two things is probably where we'll end up. I certainly get her point on that, specificity when we go to the voters, the electorate. My concern is in that messaging that we can state to the public that we're implementing the plan that we worked with them to engage them to design. So my concern priority is kind of on that end of the spectrum. I think Pam's is probably on the kind of the detail, what is this thing exactly going to look like end of the spectrum. And I think probably both of us in some ways are, right about that. And I think we'll probably, knowing the attorney, she'll win and I'll go on. No, I think that's very important, but we may need to do a little upfront to define that project more specifically than I might otherwise be inclined to do.
Well, that's fine. I'm glad to see it's moving forward, and thank you.
Mr. Horn?
We do want to build on the success of getting referendums passed.
Yes.
And so I think we developed a little bit of a formula for how that has worked for us in the past, so.
If I may, I think, first of all, there may be room for compromise there. And also, we may have alternatives. There may be alternative questions. So I think we have a lot to talk about in a short period of time, and we will do that.
We'll have one-on-one so that we can all give our input, what we think.
Well, you will actually have a discussion in council and make the final decision. So the final decision will always be yours. But we'll bring you our recommendations.
Can I go back to the question about the timing for a second? Because I recall an article in the paper the other day that St. Petersburg did an RFP for its police station and the reuse of its police station. And it got 7 offers to come in that they're going to be analyzing. But you're saying that our RFP would be ready in June to go out, or at least that's your target?
I believe we should move forward as quickly as we possibly can with an RFP for the Harborview, the mixed-use site at the Gateway Plaza of the park. That, I think, is a critical priority for us.
But whatever we do there, it has to be, would go to referendum.
Yes.
So we're up against the deadline for the supervisor of elections to get that question put together.
Well, we need to be to you by November, That's the date we're using for all of your potential referendum questions. And you may have more on other issues. Remember, you have charter review ongoing right now.
But that November date then means that you want the RFPs out and then people to respond back before November.
We will talk about what that schedule looks like. And as I had mentioned, there may be some alternatives to that. So we will, Mr. Delk and I will need to talk about that.
But I think it's important for us to keep that in, the deadlines that we're being faced as a council.
Yes.
That no matter what we do, we're going to have this finished by November if you want it on the ballot in
You actually have a little bit more time than that, but I'm talking a little bit more time. A couple weeks. But I like to get things to you in time for you to think about them, possibly change them before your real deadline hits. So, but we'll have that discussion and come back to you with a recommendation.
And my only thing is, for North Ward School specifically, I think there's going to be a real opportunity for repurposing the existing building. I think people are going to look at that as something that they do. But I definitely want to stay away from is putting a historical designation on the property, because when you do that, you're handcuffed as to exactly what you can do for the repurposing of it. But I think, for the vitality of the area and everything else, the building has great appeal, but I don't want to put the handcuffs on the building as to what it can actually become. But tearing North Ward building down to me is going to be a last resort. I see too much potential in the existing structure and location to be talking about any kind of demolition of that building right now.
Any other comments, council? Mr. Public? Oh, okay.
I was waiting for you to speak.
I had asked my question.
Oh, it was just a point of clarification. We did, based on the referendum and the charter, we can, on that Harborview site, we can't go higher than the library 5 stories, correct?
The plan calls for the building there to be no higher than the library. I think it's around 54, 57 feet.
I recall that.
I would caution us against looking at that as a bad thing.
I think
We've
it's
got a lot of private property across the street that has incredible potential. And I think when those folks decide to move forward and do something with that property, not having a big wall in front of them facing the waterfront's actually, in the long term, may be good for us. So it kind of minimizes the impact but still creates the active edge we want.
Right.
Without overwhelming the site and the park.
Well, the reason I think that's a good thing, and if it was interpreted as a bad thing, then my mistake, and I
No, I didn't mean to.
Because I'm still not convinced that a residential component on that site, of course, I've shared this with you, that more of a city place thing, community center, because we have other sites for residential, but I'm still open to a full dialogue with my colleagues. Thank you.
Well, I thought you were going to lead to a parking garage and mixed
On the
use
side of the hill that the Councilmember Hamilton said, I don't think is a bad idea either. So, we have a lot to discuss on that site before we go to RFP.
Anything further than on 3.2? Okay, move on to 3.3.
Our next speaker is Denise Sanderson, who will discuss economic development strategies and implications for community socioeconomic conditions. I hope you all had a chance to look at her presentation in your backup material because it really begins to give us an insight as to how our community is evolving.
Thank you. Denise Anderson, Director of Economic Development and Housing. And that long title is really from Jill. So that's a gift from Jill. So today, Council, I wanted to talk to you about some interesting data that has come across in the form of the 2018 ALICE study. And that generated a conversation internally leading to today's presentation. And so what I'd like to spend time talking about today is what income insecurity looks like in our community and how our federal and state funding has evolved over the last few years and what we're able to do with that and not able to do with that. And then we'll talk in some detail about affordable housing and economic development, both the challenges and opportunities that exist in those universes, some recommendations that I'll be making, and then some specific action items that we can take going forward into FY 19-20. So in terms of the data and demographics, I first want to talk about ALICE. And so who is ALICE? Asset limited, income constrained, employed households. These are those folks, those households that are above poverty level. That is a federal guideline that was established in 1955 that takes the average cost of food, multiplies it by 3, and establishes that federal poverty level. It is, however, those that are below self-sufficient. So it's often said that these are households that are one significant car repair away from being very income insecure. And so the ALICE study looks at a variety of factors rather than just the cost of food. And so they look at housing, childcare, food, transportation, healthcare, other essential items, and taxes, and it comes up with what they determine to be a household survival budget. And in the city of Clearwater, the 2018 report, which is, by the way, from 2016 data, identifies that the household survival budget is approximately 60,000 folks for a family comprised of 2 adults, 1 infant, and 1 preschooler. And in the city of Clearwater, those households are 15% are shown to be within the poverty level, 34% within the ALICE strata of income, and 51% are deemed to be self-sufficient or above the ALICE threshold as identified in this study. So we've often heard over the years about income, the wage gap that's occurring in terms of cost versus income. And we see a little bit of evidence in this just looking over the last 5 years. You could go back over time and factor in cost of money and things like that. But just in the last 5 years, when we look at median household income and put it up against the ALICE study, and unfortunately that study is not conducted every single year, although I hope that they will. And again, the ALICE study for 2018 is shown in the 2016 data, as is the other. We see a little bit of evidence of this widening gap between earnings and survivability for our households. We recently, speaking of old data, we recently received this information from HUD. As you know, we're an entitlement city, and so HUD provides to us our low to moderate income areas every 4 years. And this map was just released. I'm certainly not expecting you to read the census tract numbers in there, but those areas shown in orange reflect those census tracts in which greater than 50% of the households within those census tracts meet that low to moderate income threshold. Are below that threshold, if you will. And so this data is from 2011 to 2015. It was just released and went into effect April 1. We use this going forward for the activities we conduct. But really what I'm intending to show you here is that our neighborhoods that are income insecure are not concentrated in 1, 2, or 3 areas in the city, but really throughout the entire east to west, north to south. And so in terms of what's going on in our federal and state funding, as I said, we're an entitlement community. We receive from HUD Community Development Block Grant and Home Investment Partnerships funding entitlement grants. We also receive program income through the repayment of loans made through HOME and through SHIP. SHIP is our state funding, State Housing Initiatives Partnership Program. And SHIP funding is, as you probably know, is funded under the Sadowski Act, the doc stamps through mortgage transactions and like. And unfortunately, that SHIP funding, though the Sadowski Act said is to be preserved for this use, the SHIP funding gets swept quite often. And in FY18, you see a dramatic decrease in SHIP funding. And this is in response to the legislation for hardening of schools last year. In response to the Parkland shooting. And so this is really just kind of showing you that while real estate transactions are on fire and we should be seeing increased SHIP funding, we're actually seeing decreased from the height in 2016. So that's a bit of a challenge for us because we use that funding to leverage a lot of our federal funds, our home funds. So in terms of affordable housing, some of the things that we have always done is the production and preservation of units, both single family and multifamily, in terms of new construction, rehabilitation, and down payment assistance. We do a number of subsidy layering activities to really encourage private investment, to take advantage of private investment going on. And we also apply restrictive covenants in the terms of land use restriction agreements so that those units remain affordable over time, even if sold through the private market. But there are significant challenges. So with rising land costs, it makes it very, very difficult for these developers and home buyers to be able to acquire properties within this subsidized funding layer. Rising construction costs and the shortage of trades, no news to any of us, but that's obviously a challenge now for us. There are location limitations as well, environmental restrictions, can't build a single family home on dirty land, flood zones, things like that require we move properties or have projects in certain locations. So we will not be building affordable housing on our barrier island, as an example. And then, of course, there's political will. What's going on at the state funding level and to certainly some degree at the federal level influences the funds that we receive from those sources. And then NIMBYism, which thankfully we don't see much of this. Every now and then a little bit of the, not in my backyard, please. But very typically we're not subject to NIMBYism here, but it could be a challenge. In terms of opportunities, we're making some changes within the housing division that allows us hopefully a more steady stream of particularly program income over time, because we do have an ability to affect that to some degree. And again, program income is that repayment of funds through loans. And so what we're looking to do and have been doing are making long-term loans to developers so that we get that steady stream over time. Our hope, of course, is that we continue to churn that out for additional projects. We also brought to you a foreclosure policy a few years ago and have begun moving forward that, a death of a homeowner, for example, for which no will was established, often puts property in limbo and things of that nature. And so we're able to move forward under the foreclosure policy that we established and reclaim some of those properties so that we can use them again, either for new construction or sale and down payment assistance. And then there's land bank and acquisition opportunities. Penny for Pinellas 3 had this, and Penny for Pinellas 4, and we'll talk a little bit more about what that is. I know we've talked about that previously, but I'll give you a bit of an update on that. Allows us to perhaps put property in land bank. This is really important in the multifamily market in particular, because it helps keep the cost of development lower if you have a long-term and 99-year lease on property, as an example, instead of the sale of property. So in terms of economic development, as you know, it is driven by, because I say this all the time and preach, but we're driven by our economic-based theory and supported by our economic development strategic plan. But Bill Fruth, an economist with an economics research firm that he founded called Polycom, said in 2014 that there's this great myth that any new job will help the economy. And so, 100 years ago when I thought maybe I'd be an economist, this speaks to me, the wonk that I am. But in terms of how the local economy works, it's really about money moving through the economy. And so this is through the sale of goods and services. And we know that primary industries, they sell their product outside the community, they bring new money in, often described as our manufacturers, our IT software, et cetera. But it's also tourism, because money coming in the pockets of our tourists is a primary transaction. However, many of the jobs that are supported by that industry are in fact low wage. And so that's not exactly a home run for us in terms of economic growth as it relates to wages. However, it does support a great deal of jobs. And then money, of course, churns throughout our economy. This is the multiplier effect, and we've talked about that in the past. And that's easily identified in places like retail, restaurant, other places that we spend our money. And then money goes out of our economy. Every time we buy a car, money goes to Detroit or Japan or wherever. The bottom line is this, that the economy really only grows when more money stays in than what goes out. So what does that mean for us in terms of challenges? Well, primary employers do not need to be here. By the very nature of their business, they do not need to be here in order to sell that good or service. And so geography matters. So geographic location influences their operating costs. And when we're fully built out, as we are, we're the most densely populated county in all of Florida, and there's no available land, that means there's a very high cost of redevelopment. And these primary industry employers are looking for 5 to 55 or 30 to fly. And I did not make that up. That's a Mike Meidel saying, by the way, with Pinellas County Economic Development, but I thought it was brilliant. So 5 to 55 means for those selling goods, They want to be 5 minutes to a roadway that's 55 miles an hour. And when Tampa Bay Express comes in, I'm told that you'll be able to go from Curlew Road all the way down to Miami without a single stoplight. That puts us in a great spot. And 30 to fly, those are selling those services out there. They want to be 30 minutes to an international airport. We've got 2 in very close proximity. Again, we are in a good spot, but it is a challenge. It is a challenge. So higher cost means lower profitability, and companies will move when it's no longer profitable for them to stay. This is really significant because we do have aging office and industrial sites, as you know. And in fact, HGR and SB Friedman are consultants recently hired by Pinellas County to do a jobs and housing study. The outcome of that is still pending, but I did have the opportunity to communicate with them at the last Penny for Pinellas 4 Joint Review Committee and ask them to look at our aging office and industrial sites, because we do have throughout the county these functionally obsolete facilities. And then to a much lesser extent, of course, we can influence workforce innovation and entrepreneurship. But there is a significant, this has long been a national discussion about a talent and skills mismatch. We do know that people like to live near where they work, and that can be a challenge here in Pinellas County, as we know, as I've just shown you with our ALICE study. And then, of course, there's limited transportation and mobility. We are one of, if I believe, we are actually the last major metropolitan area that does not have commuter rail. Innovation and entrepreneurship, it's also long been said that the state of Florida actually sees a dearth of venture capitalists, and I personally cannot affect that, but we, as a community, as a state, as a county, we really need to stand behind that and encourage entrepreneurship and innovation. So there are some significant opportunities for us to affect the socioeconomic conditions of our community, and that really is to attract investment and employers. And from my perspective, the opportunities really lie within the US 19 corridor in the downtown CRA area and some of the activities that Ms. Thompson has and strategies that she's brought forward to you in the past. The Opportunity Zone is generating a great deal of interest. This is the Census Tract 259, which is generally bounded by Drew Street to Missouri to Lakeview to the waterfront. It's generating a lot of phone calls. Hopefully it will generate a lot of investment. And then there's the Hercules Belcher Road industrial area. It's not really named industrial area, but that's, as you know, primarily our manufacturing IRT area. So some recommendations, and again, I'll steal from the great Bill Fruth. His recommendation to Pinellas County back in 2014, and actually I think way back when with Pinellas by Design, was that we must have approved sites that can be permitted in 90 days. And to the great credit of our Planning and Development Department, they put forth 2 plans that you all adopted that really take us leap forward, and that is the US 19 zoning district and the downtown redevelopment plan. With the form-based code approach that they used, it really does allow for desired uses the ability to go straight to building construction permit, which really significantly cuts down and gets you to that 90-day mark. Then there's the acquisition and preservation of office and industrial sites. Penny for Pinellas 4 has an 8.3% set aside that was approved by voters. 4.15%, according to resolution passed by the Board of County Commissioners, is the goal for both affordable housing and economic development, splitting that 8.3 in half. The Penny funds will allow for acquisition of sites for affordable housing. It will allow for acquisition and possibly some vertical construction, but because we're still in the rules-making portion of the Joint Review Committee, I'm not certain if acquisition and construction for economic development will occur. Stay tuned. And then there's some infrastructure improvements. And again, this goes back to Bill Fruth. Approved sites, ready to go. Infrastructure improvements are absolutely essential. We compete against Pasco County, Eastern Hillsborough, and Manatee and Sarasota counties for a lot of greenfield that they have. And cost of development is much less expensive in those communities, and so having the ability to go straight to building permit with sites that can be constructed upon immediately is incredibly important. And I'll be bringing back to you in the next couple of months some recommendations as to how we do that. Other recommendations are related to aligning our affordable housing activities and our job growth areas with transportation routes, and this was really kind of the point of Advantage Pinellas that you all heard at the last council meeting on May the 2nd. Because folks really do want to live near where they work, and so we need to give them the opportunity to do that. And then there's the Economic Development Strategic Plan. It was 10 years ago that the data was pulled for that, and they started that process. We'll be bringing that into next year, an update to that plan. How are we done? Where are we going? What do we need to change given the things that we have done in the past 10 years? And we'll be aligning that with, thankfully coincident to that, is our HUD-required 5-year consolidated plan. So some of the activities within that consolidated plan will focus on economic development as well. Additional recommendations are support for transportation and mobility initiatives, whether they're local, county, or statewide, or region-wide. Workforce skills development and training. This really starts at the K-12 arena now and goes all the way through tech centers, colleges, and into our workplaces with on-the-job training and other kinds of programs. And while I recognize that we can't really directly affect a lot of these things, it's important that we support them. And then entrepreneurship and innovation ecosystems, such as Clearwater Business Spark and others that exist out there and are rising up. And in my view, together, I believe all of these things really do help that family that you see there with the preschooler, the infant, and 2 adults. Once you have a solid economic development policy plan and program, education and workforce development is aligned. Entrepreneurship and innovation it's an attractive place to invest, and that transportation gets you there. And you have available housing types of all types and all prices. That's really when people can move through the socioeconomic strata and rise up. And so next steps. Pending for Pinellas 4, as I mentioned, the Joint Review Committee is currently in the rules-making stage. We'll be bringing forward their recommendations to the Board of County Commissioners in September for adoption. Penny funds become available January 1, and for the public, or probably a lot of employees right now who are watching this, those penny funds are bondable beginning in January. Infrastructure incentives, as I mentioned, I'll be bringing forward some recommendations as to how we do that, keeping aligned with what's going on in the Advantage Pinellas program, and then a business attraction marketing plan that we're about to embark upon in the next couple of months and through all of next year is about to be set in motion. That business attraction marketing plan really is about data collection and analysis that has largely been completed. For all 4,096 parcels of the US 19 corridor, we hired Cardno to do an evaluation of all of those parcels in terms of what sits on the hazardous materials list for state and federal. We've developed some GIS layers, or rather tools for us to be able to gain access to the GIS layers that we already have, so that we know virtually every pipe, every tree, the diameter of every tree, which I find is interesting, and all sorts of things about a piece of property. So if a developer comes to us, we know a lot about it and can provide that information to the developer. We're making some significant website enhancements and I have in beta some tools for that, including site selector tools, demographics, a whole bunch of user-friendly tools that site selectors and small businesses even could take advantage of. As I mentioned, the infrastructure investments and incentives, once approved, we certainly hope to be able to promote those. Land acquisition with Penny 4, and many of you may remember Diane Hufford, who retired in December. I have held off on filling that position pending the outcome of the PSPC study that we're all going to hear about shortly, but hope to have a new staff member on board in July who will focus almost exclusively on US 19, the Hercules industrial area, and brownfield redevelopment. This will all be done through a marketing campaign that features direct email to over 400 site selectors that we currently have access to. We can purchase lists of more should we choose to do that. Those direct email campaigns will include featured sites, and we're working with our real estate community to identify those. We'll be participating in industry trade shows, either independently with Pinellas County Economic Development or with the state. We have social and sponsored media content contracts in place and programs and plans developed for those. We have completed production of some videos. I'll show you a brief bit of one here in a moment. And all of these are tied together with analytics. So over time, we'll know what's generating response, what's generating interest, and we'll pivot as necessary. And so with that, like to show you a video. Do we have some volume? How do I do this? Anybody know? Joelle? Technical assistance needed, Joelle. It's a fun video. Yes, but it's fun. Do you want to stop? No?
Nice pictures.
Huh? What, Joelle? I would have to stop it to unload the thing. Well, it's just.
Hey, can we start over?
It's
I
just
wanna
me.
hear it. I want to hear it.
So now they want to hear it. So we have two videos while Joelle's getting this queued up. This one is what I call the site selector video. It's really meant to talk about the assets that we have and why this region, why Clearwater, why this region is good for business. We have a companion video that really speaks to the visiting CEO. As you know, we conduct hundreds of visits every year to our within our business community, and we hear constantly. In fact, just last week we heard many of our CEOs were first visitors here. And so we have a companion video that I hope we can actually get playing in some of our hotel rooms. That really speaks to why this is a great place to live, raise your family, and that you can have your business here as well. And we'll actually be doing some what they call geofencing. We hope to do where we can push videos to folks who are attending conferences on our beach, as an example, to really plant the seed that this is a great place for them to consider locating.
Oops.
Sorry, I wanted to show you full slide. Here we go. And again, that's a shortened version of the video that we have, and then we have what's known as teaser clips for the social media market. With that, I'm happy to take questions.
Comments or questions? Mr.
One
Public?
question. It is exciting. It's an uplifting presentation. I thought that the US 19 corridor, that whole redevelopment plan is very good, and it's working. There's a lot of interest. I love how we can now get from our property in North County when we finally get out of that Pasco mess and we get the Pinellas, how it's fixed. So I'm real happy that we're promoting and we're ready for redevelopment on US 19 corridor, and especially also for the downtown redevelopment plan. I do have one question because it was brought to my attention by some business owners and property owners that though we have no height restrictions, I'll give you for example, if we were to have an earthquake or a big fire and the SunTrust building, the Bank of Trust building burnt down, we have no height restrictions downtown. Because of the current FAR within the downtown redevelopment plan, would they be able to build the same structure? Because I've been told they would not. It would have to be much smaller because of our FAR ratio. Is that, I don't want to have any barriers to the unlimited height restriction that we have, and if the FAR had not, is there a mistake? Is there flexibility for that?
Never heard of a FAR constrained issue downtown about, I mean, we've had some pretty large, literally somebody almost.
I wouldn't want to have to address it
building we put on-
after such a tragedy, but I just thought I'd bring that up. It seems like an appropriate time to ask that question.
Tina Clayton, Planning and Development. I'm not aware of that, but let's say it is out there. There is the Public Amenities Incentive Pool where we have a ton of floor area that could be made available to people if they need it. So if that was the case, we have an option to really increase their allowable development potential, but
Well-
4.0 is pretty high.
It seems to me, though, that as opposed to getting floor area space as an incentive, then we're limited, because there's going to be a pool of dedicated, not unlimited, if I'm not mistaken. So wouldn't we want to adjust that FAR initially right off the bat?
Well, we had restrictions by the Countywide Planning Authority when we adopted the downtown plan, when we did the update based on the rules that were in place. We couldn't exceed that, but I think that the Ford Pinellas is in the process of making some revisions that may open that up for us. So we're monitoring those changes, and if that comes to fruition, then we can talk about whether or not we want to amend the plan and increase that.
Okay, so the 4.0 is because of county restrictions, but there is a path forward
Yes.
for somebody.
But 4.0 is very generous.
Yes.
I mean, there are entire counties that don't allow that. So.
Well, my only point was and those two buildings were brought to my attention. If something were to make them crumble, they wouldn't be able to build the same size building because of the current FAR of 4.0.
Maybe we should
We
have a
can look at
conversation offline with the property owner to really make that
We're
determination.
not sure that's accurate.
Okay.
And worst case too, we have a process called termination of status of nonconformity that they could avail themselves to as well.
Great. Thank you. That sounds,
Stand by, Ms. Clayton, because that's confusing now to those who don't understand what we're talking about. St. Petersburg is talking about building 40-story buildings on lots that are as the size of the Bank of America or SunTrust. So I'm not exactly sure.
is St. Pete 4 point, what is theirs, by the way? They're
Well, it
in
would
Pinellas
have to
County
be-
as well.
Yeah.
Well, they operate under, I think, a DRI for their entire downtown area, and so they have different restrictions. Under the old rules, you had to go through a special area planning process and get your FAR approved. And when the 4.0 FAR is actually higher than what the county-wide rules allowed in most any other place. So, there are some restrictions when we updated the plan. But we think we may have an option if we need it. But I, again, encourage the property owner to come in and see us to verify, in fact, that, he does exceed 4.0.
So in any of the other sites in downtown that we're promoting to develop, and I know we have different areas as you move further out of the core where we adjust the different heights, we wouldn't be restricted. A 4.0 in our assessment would not restrict height, where height is currently not a problem anywhere in downtown.
Well, the unlimited height is in the downtown core.
Right.
It's not everywhere else.
Right.
So
Right, okay.
we have a lot of development potential downtown that is largely unutilized.
So we can go 30, 40 stories downtown on most all available.
We've already given development approvals for buildings up to 370 or 80 feet. So
Okay,
we've had people bring us in ideas of twin 40-story towers. So there's not a lot, I think, that's not on the table right now under the current scenario. But if somebody's got a particular problem, we certainly be
maybe
happy
we
to
just
talk
look at
to
those
them.
two buildings because that was what was brought to my attention. But I mean, okay.
But it's good to know and understand what's out there and concerns
Right.
with people, so we would
Right.
be happy to talk to them.
Okay.
Mr. Cundiff, did you have something?
Yes, I had a question for Ms. Sanderson, and it had to do with your slide that said housing all types, all prices. And I know you're concerned and the city's concerned about affordable housing, workforce housing. And what I'm wondering is if you have a serious concern or reservations about beginning a program of tiny homes, smaller homes that would be both affordable and also for millennials who don't want a lot of space. What direction are we heading with that?
In terms of tiny homes, what I have come to understand is that the cost of construction for a tiny home and affixing it permanently and in place, which is what we would be looking at, there is not a great deal of cost benefit to that versus perhaps what would be viewed as a non-tiny home or a standard home. And so there's not a great deal of savings. What it does save you is land. And we can accomplish a lot of the tiny home kind of benefit through accessory dwelling units, which we now allow, particularly within the downtown redevelopment plan area. And so accessory dwelling units and things like that are certainly a possibility. My understanding is currently we don't have a tiny home kind of provision in our code, but that is something that code would have to address. I know the county was looking at that, particularly, for example, in mobile home parks, allowing tiny home construction for what is already in place in mobile home parks. But I would view that certainly as a planning effort. Certainly from an affordable housing perspective, not opposed to anything like that. I'm just not sure that it gains us much other than some density homes.
There are people now who are with government, federal government subsidies building tiny homes for almost nothing, and they're going up in St. Petersburg, and I know at least one of our residents, developer, would like to have them in her neighborhood as well. And she's been offered 2 on any property at basically at no cost, but there's been no movement on it at all for a year.
Yeah, I would have to deflect to planning on what code allows for those. No project has come to me proposing a tiny home development, 2 or any number for that matter. I've certainly heard that there's been a discussion that's been occurring. I know that there's a training program that is sponsored by a governmental entity or governmental funds that is teaching folks skills to construct tiny homes, and I believe that's probably what you're referring to, is that partnership of a local developer and that training program. But no proposal has come forward for me to even consider. I'm not sure that it could be constructed in our current, within our current guidelines, simply because of setback requirements. I'm not sure that you can, in platted lots, you could still get 2 tiny homes, if you will, because of setback requirements. But again, that's more of a conversation for planning.
I'd have to echo what Denise said. There's been a lot of talk about tiny homes, but I don't think we've ever received an actual proposal. We don't have specific requirements for quote-unquote tiny homes. I think we could have a way to allow such a development, either through our higher density residential categories or through our residential infill process. So we just have to see what was being proposed, and I think it's doable in that regard. One of the things that we will be doing is working on updating our comprehensive plan, and we're going to be looking at housing in depth. We've applied for some funding to help us look into housing. We brought the issue of accessory dwellings during our last comprehensive plan update, and there really wasn't support at that time on council to allow an accessory unit unless there was enough density to support 2 units. So that is something that we'd like for you all to consider, again, moving forward. And as we update our comprehensive plan, we'll be talking to you about that.
Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions? Ms. Anderson, I recall a couple of years ago, maybe we had a discussion on new signage on US 19
Yeah.
to help direct people. And, okay.
I think Mr. Delk said earlier something about District 7. Gina, come have a seat.
Oh, it's Gina again, okay.
No. This is a discussion.
What type of signage?
Well, remember we were the different color code? Wayfinding, yeah.
Well, yes, that's been a very long, drawn-out process. We've had a lot of pushback from FDOT. We've tried to find other communities within the state of Florida that have used wayfinding on similar roadways, and we found some over in Daytona, and we presented that to District 7, and they don't agree with us that it's allowed here in District 7. So that's kind of where we are right now. We're still trying to think of ways to work with them on that, but we haven't been very successful to date.
Is that something that maybe we need to get to our state legislators to have them, champion for us?
Well, it's interesting. Gina has really pushed this as hard as she could. I've been involved with conversations with the district secretary, and we just seem to just simply be on a different side of the street with the district staff. And the secretary has really not been as sympathetic to us as a result of that. And so we're always in this balancing issue of how hard do we push, because there are a number of things that we want the district to support us in. And so is this one of those things that we fall on our sword? Gina and I haven't talked lately, so I don't know what the result of her last push, but that's kind of where we stand.
And that's a valid concern. Is this something that is really crucial for the redevelopment of US 19, and the corridor, the way we were planning on it, with these wayfinding signs, or can we hold off a little longer? But I know that, there may be some people out there wondering why we haven't done anything since we had that.
One of the things we did, Mayor, is that we asked a consultant, and I thought we had a very good consultant who went throughout the state to find examples that we could demonstrate to the District 7 Secretary that, hey, these things are used elsewhere in the state, so we're not asking you to do something that FDOT isn't doing already. It just was not, it wasn't enough to convince them. But we had some examples. Would you not agree?
We had an excellent example that was actually funded by FDOT through their LAP program, and they somehow didn't agree that our program was the same, and I think that it was exactly the same. In fact, we tried to tweak our citywide project that we'd been working on to mirror that, and we represented it to them, and they still didn't agree. So we talked to them about doing some other things, potentially exit numbers. And so we're having some discussion with staffs in the county on that before we come talk to you about that, if we can get some buy-in, so at a minimum. But there's also options. We internally have talked about doing the broader wayfinding program throughout the city, and hopefully one day connect US 19 and State Route 60, but that leaves some big holes in the wayfinding system if we can't have those signs, but we're not going to give up.
Okay. Okay.
Does the county assist in these efforts, since, it would make sense, since we have unincorporated, we have Clearwater, we have...
Well, I think that's part of the fear, that this would get even bigger from FDOT's
right.
perspective. We're trying, and I know that especially economic development interests, Mike Mydell, they're all kind of watching to see what happens in the city of Clearwater. But I guess the positive news is I think we'll be able to move forward with the sign on the Duke Energy Bridge. Engineering now is working on that, so at least hopefully we'll get the Clearwater sign on the pedestrian bridge.
Okay.
Basically, it was Daytona Beach, was it not,
Yes.
that modeled basically what we were
Yes.
trying to do?
Thank you. Number 3.4 then, unless there's any other questions. 3.4.
All right, thank you, Mayor. We're going to have a neighborhoods update presentation from our neighborhood professional, Juliana Green. I think is this your first time?
It is, so it's a big day. That means we have to go easy on me? First time. Best behavior, please.
But I think, Council, we had a very successful neighborhoods day, and I think Juliana is capturing this in the presentation.
Great. Good afternoon, council members. My name is Juliana Green. As the city's new neighborhoods coordinator, I'm here to present to you on the success of Neighborhoods Day 2019, as well as give you a few updates about Neighborhoods Day 2020. So council members, you, our city staff, and our event organizers did an incredible job this Neighborhoods Day. As you can see, this year's Neighborhoods Day was record-breaking in more than one way. We had a record-breaking number of participating neighborhoods, a total of 35 participating neighborhoods. Across those 35 events, we had more than 2,650 attendees. And on top of that, we had a record-breaking number of participating city staff. So we were at 152 for that. Here's the breakdown of the departments that those 152 staff came from. These staff members contributed between 1,000 and 1,200 hours touring neighborhoods. Council members, I want to thank you for your efforts because your hours are also included in this sum. On average, each of you visited 40% more neighborhoods this year than you did last year, while only experiencing an 11% increase in the length of your day, which is definitely something to celebrate. We got wonderful feedback from our event organizers after a survey that we put out. I'll give you a selection of that. City staff showed up and conversed with our neighborhood. That dialogue alone was a very good thing. City did a fantastic job promoting and helping the neighborhoods have a successful event. City representatives were very informative, helpful, friendly. They did a great job. So, as we all know, Neighborhoods Day is about more than block parties and all-you-can-eat snow cones, although those are great perks. Neighborhoods Day is also about bringing City Hall to the neighborhoods, finding out about the issues that they're most concerned and interested in, and then when possible, working to address those issues. So here you can see a breakdown of the a summary table of the issues and services that residents expressed the most interest in. Each of the 30 requests here is organized by topic, and each was addressed in under a month. So to give you an example, one resident requested the better maintenance of some trees on Northridge Drive, and we were able to have that resolved in less than a week. This brings me to Neighborhoods Day 2020. I have two brief announcements on that front. First, this year we had to cap our participation at 35 neighborhoods, even though we had significantly more than 35 neighborhoods interested in participating. So for next year, we are presently evaluating the feasibility of expanding our cap to 40 neighborhoods. Second, we've selected a permanent, ongoing date for all future Neighborhoods Days after sending a survey to our event coordinators and working with other departments to avoid conflicting dates. I think that this will ensure predictability for staff, attendees, and organizers, and hopefully the increased consistency will lead to increased participation. So from this point forward, you can expect Neighborhoods Day to fall on the last Saturday of March every year. This does conclude my presentation, and if there are any questions on Neighborhoods Day 2019 or 2020, I'd be happy to take them at this time.
Any questions or comments, council? Mr. Hamilton?
Well, I wonder if March is, and I'm just putting this out there, I mean, March is such a busy time. I mean, it's very difficult to get out to the west side of town, to the beach and whatnot. I know Island Estates themselves had their own party that wasn't even on Neighborhoods Day because Neighborhoods Day fell during a really high traffic time, and they just felt like they didn't want to do it then. So I'm wondering if March is the right time. I would, May would be, to me, I think May's also a good time. The weather's still great. We're not into the hot times, and traffic is much lighter. But that's just a suggestion, and we can have discussions on that. And my only other complaint is I know my crew traveled all day long and never saw an ice cream truck. I don't know if it was planned that way or not, but that's the way it worked out.
3 trucks.
3 trucks, and we never saw one, did we? Nah, see? I have a
Make
witness.
sure that your driving route coincides with it. You'll follow the steps. That's the first thing. The second thing is we did issue a survey to our event organizers, and 85% strongly preferred to have that event in the springtime. So we looked at the months in the springtime. We broke it down with other departments weekend by weekend. We worked around Sugar Send and other conflicting times, and this was the singular weekend that worked for all parties.
All right, well, let me chime in on Mr. Hamilton's then, because the last Saturday in March, on occasion would coincide with Western Easter.
Yes.
And it just
I should say-
the end of the spring, training season. I just hesitate thinking that that's the best time to do it.
I should say that in the trajectory of the next 5 years, there's one Easter that will fall on the last Saturday of March, because March will have 5 weekends, and what I should have said when I presented was that it won't be the last Saturday of every March, but instead the 4th weekend of March, because in the one instance in the next 5 years in which the Easter will fall on the 5th weekend, but it won't fall into the 4th weekend, so it will be preserved in that sense.
Okay.
Any further commentary?
Mr. Poglaze?
Well, since she said commentary, it's not really a question. But, so had the opportunity to meet some great city staff that I hadn't met before, drove around a lot of shortcuts through a lot of different neighborhoods. This weekend, I was in Pasco County, 4 different neighborhoods, and I didn't mean this to be a blast Pasco County. Out of all the neighborhoods I drove in Clearwater, there was no pothole issue, no problem. It's some of the worst city infrastructure I've ever seen, and I know we have a staff member come from Pasco County. Do they not invest at all in their city? It's some of the worst roads I've ever seen. I mean, it wasn't even a touch-up patch job. It was just hole after hole after hole. And these are neighborhoods with median income, pretty nice houses. I was amazed. I was amazed. So good job to our infrastructure, our staff, what we do here in Clearwater, because the city looks pretty good.
We did have a number of sidewalk traffic-related concerns, and those were addressed in under a month. So we filled different cracks in pavement, things like that. And so yes, our sidewalks and traffic team, they are really fantastic to work with.
I mean, it's just having a schedule and then sticking to it, milling the streets and going to neighborhoods, and everybody knows when it's due. They pick up the phone, they can call. They'll know when their neighborhood's due for repaving. So it's just good job, guys.
And to piggyback on that, there was an article in the paper today about Mayor Castor in Tampa having to face increased stormwater rates because their infrastructure, because their pipes are so old, and they haven't addressed that issue over the years. So again, that's something that previous councils and with the work of the staff, has done to make sure that is a minimal problem as opposed to a major problem here in Clearwater. Mr. Pogles, Mr. Albritton.
I just wanted to thank staff. They did an excellent job this year. And I don't have a problem having island states not the same day, because if it's in the spring, I'm highly involved with that one, and I wouldn't be able to get to the other neighborhoods. And this year, they did get us around to an awful lot of neighborhoods, and we, not only was council and the mayor and staff there, but police and fire and everybody was so helpful with everybody answering questions. I thought it was, this is what that event's all about, and good job. Thank you very much.
Thank you all for your time.
It is a fun day. Thank you, for organizing it the first year. And Ms. Maskey suggested that next year, Mr. Hamilton, I could drive a truck, an ice cream truck.
There we go.
So,
I'll call you and find out where you are.
I'll find you.
I'll call you and find out where you are.
Agenda item 3.5.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm going to introduce Jennifer Poirier, our HR Director, who is going to introduce our Bob Longmire.
Good afternoon. This is a long-awaited study, so I won't take up more time. I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Bob Longmire from Public Sector Personnel Consultants. Thank you.
Yeah, so we'll see. There we go. That looks familiar. Okay. Yeah, so as Jennifer said, I'm Bob Longmire of Public Sector Personnel Consultants. I thought today would walk through just a little bit of the classification and total compensation study that we did. I thought I'd introduce ourselves, our firm, a little bit of what the study is, maybe a little bit of what the study isn't, and then go over some of the high-level findings that we had, and then some the review for the implementation steps of now that we know what we know, how do we respond? What do we do now that we have access to this information? And then if you have any questions during this, definitely stop. You can let me know. I'll answer any questions as we go forward. If I'm not maybe fully explaining something, definitely let me know. I think it's more fun to have a little bit of a conversation or a dialogue or a back and forth than maybe it is for me to talk about job descriptions for 35 minutes or something of that nature. So if you have any questions, definitely let me know. But as Jennifer said, and as our name suggests, we're public sector personnel consultants. All that we do is do personnel consulting for the public sector. Not very creative people in what we name the firms or anything like that. We get a chance to do maybe 30 or 40 studies a year. We responded to an RFP, and through a competitive bid process, we were selected to be the vendor that does this. I would say ultimately, having the amount of experience that we have in this sector and being able to do classification and total compensation studies hopefully just qualifies us to ask good questions. We come into each individual study with a ground-up approach. We build custom for every single study. We're not relying on anything we had from previous studies or previous engagements. We do everything from the ground up and use only full-time staff to do that. So it allows us to control our quality, control our schedule, control our budget, and really meet the demands that you had for this project.
So I thought maybe we'd start today and talk about the classification side of things. So classification is maybe just an overly complicated way of saying, does the job title make sense? Does the job description accurately reflect the work that's being done? So that's what we were really after in the first part of this study. So I would say it's maybe been somewhere between, we were trying to find the last time a classification and compensation study was done, and it was maybe in the ballpark of maybe 15 to 20 years since the last time a study like this has been done. So I can think of some technologies that have been developed in the last 15 years, like the internet and computers and smartphones, that change the nature of what employees do, right? So a little bit of this was to say, do we have the right number of job titles now that we have efficiencies, now that we have some changes? Do we have the right number and levels of the job classifications that are in existence? Now, inside of that, no one's being let go as part of the process. We weren't recommending anyone be reduced. We're not here to say, with the advent of technology, or if you just worked these people harder, you could have less people. That's not part of this study. So these are something that most organizations do every maybe 5 to 8 years. There's a study like this, so it was a little bit maybe overdue to kind of pop our head up and to say, all right, now that we have this many titles, what's the going, kind of what should be entitled to that? So ultimately, I would say that from the classification side of things, your house is relatively in order. There was nothing that we really found that was a little bit, that needed major revisions or big changes. And the way that we did this process is we went out, and the last time I was in this room, I don't think council chamber was here. The podium was facing the other way, and we were talking with some of the members of the gas utility and handing out questionnaires. So each individual employee had the opportunity to go out and either individually or part as a team complete a questionnaire that we had that's basically us saying, hey, tell me what you do. Tell me what your job entails, what are your functions and your tasks and your duties, so that we can hear directly from each individual employee what it is that they do. And so if you think about the direction the information flows, the employee is telling us what they do. We're not coming into your city and we're not telling them, here's how you should run your library or your gas department or your water or your wastewater utility. So we're learning directly from those employees what it is that they're doing. And then we're suggesting a job title that says, hey, for the last 15 or 20 years, maybe we called it this. Now we think this is an appropriate term. This is what the industry is calling this. This is how we think about these nowadays. So a little bit of just housekeeping, making sure that when we use specialist or coordinator or technician or 1, 2, 3, 4, coordinator, manager, supervisor, that there's consistency. When we use these terms, there's some consistency around how we use them. One of the other ways that we gained information from the employees, that we heard directly from them about what it is that they do, is we had the opportunity to go around in the late fall of last year and do some on-site meetings, some ride-alongs, some desk audits, some walk-and-talks, where the opportunity to, with the questionnaire in hand, to say, hey, tell me a little bit more about this, kind of point to some things, tell me what you do, let me learn directly from you, kind of in a format that's a little more comfortable for employees to talk about what they do, really again so that we can answer those first two questions from the classification side of things. Does the job title make sense? Does the job description accurately reflect what you do? And then the third question, and really the third part that we'll spend a little bit more time talking about today, is what's the going rate for that work? So we use all the information that we gather through the questionnaire, through the interviews, to go out and define that job out in the market. But the first thing we have to do is to say, do we have a good job title? Does it accurately reflect the work that's being performed? And we learn directly from the employees about what it is that they do with some feedback from the supervisors to kind of get a whole picture there. So like I had alluded to a little bit before, from a high-level standpoint, there really weren't that many changes. There were 12 or so positions where currently you called them something different. They had different titles, but they were actually doing a lot of the same things. We got the questionnaires back. We put them side by side. They read very similar. The nouns might be a little bit different, but the verbs were kind of the same. So we could merge those together. There was 100 or so positions that we just needed to kind of clean up some of the titling protocols. You use this term, let's use this term. Just kind of surface level changes. There are about 25 or so titles that nobody was in. They weren't going to be used. The department directors and the managers didn't think they were going to hire for those. They weren't budgeted. They just were living on the salary schedule, so it was time to clean them up. Right? Things that we normally see. There's nothing that we saw in this process that kind of jumped out or surprised us, given the duration since the last time of a study like this has been done. So if I were to oversimplify the complicated process of classification, I'd say your house is pretty well in order, and we just kind of made some cosmetic changes to be brought up to date with the way things are going in the industry right now. So maybe let me pause there real quick. Any questions on the classification side of things, or those two questions?
Your timing was perfect, because
Okay.
it's like, before I forget the question,
Yeah, yeah.
it's so relevant and fresh in everybody's mind.
Yes,
It's good to take
perfect.
those breaks. So the fact that our house is in pretty good order, and we haven't done this study in 15 years, to me it says, first of all, it's impossible that we don't have duplications because of the technology that's out there. So could you then expand that to say that that's what those 25 titles are that are not being used? It's efficiencies that we've discovered just by accident or running those
Yeah, and
departments that we have.
some of those mergers as well, right? So, there's 12 titles that were merging together. They used to be something different. They used to be a specialty, a unique nature. They used to be something that existed, that was set apart, was other than, but now it's kind of been more standardized and can be merged together. So there's about 35, 40 titles that fell into those existences. Kind of fell into those groups.
Okay. Thank you, that answered my question.
Okay. So I'm going the wrong way. We don't want to start over, we want to keep going. All right, so the salary survey side of things. Globally, like we've been saying, a classification and total compensation study answers 3 questions. What's an appropriate job title? Does the job description accurately reflect the work that's being done? And the third question, what we're going to spend a little bit more time on, is what's the going rate for that work? It's a relatively factual question. We can answer that question, and that's what we've been tasked with. So there was 13 other organizations that we requested their org charts, their pay plans, their benefit documents, their bargaining agreements. And we were then able to go through, and based on the information we had from classification, based on the PAQs and the interviews, we were able to go through that and to say, all right, you have a 1, a 2, a 3. Over there, they just have a worker and a senior. How does that align with your 1s and 2s and 3s and crew leaders? Which is the right match? What level of complexity, of authority, accountability do we want to benchmark this position on to really be able to make sure we're comparing apples to apples? And to answer that question, where are we? And I think the conversation today, we're going to address where are we, but then also some of our recommendations and some of staff recommendations on where do we want to go. Now that we know what we know, how do we respond to that? So again, if I were to oversimplify the the total compensation process, I'd say we were able to find survey data for more than 200 positions. Of those, I would say you are competitive. You're paying at market for maybe about 45% of those positions. So if you're a glass half full kind of person, that's how you're going to say that sentence. If you're a little bit of a glass half full kind of person, you're going to say, well, we're paying behind market for 55% of our positions. So it's the same way to say it, however you want to approach that. And we'll talk a little bit more about how do we respond to that, what do we do now that we know that. But I'd also just make a note here to say that we took benefits into consideration here. From a total compensation standpoint, there's really only a couple decisions that council generally makes with benefits, is to say our benefits are so good that we can afford to underpay employees. Right? That's really kind of the only statement that total compensation can result to, and I would recommend that's not what we saw from the benefits. The benefits were right at market. So there was nothing in the total compensation study that suggested we should underpay employees in response to the market because the benefits are so good. We found out the benefits were almost exactly statistically at market level. So they were just right where you would expect them to be, right at the average. So in all of our recommendations, what we're saying is we want our benefits already at market. So now let's make our salaries and the going rates for the work that we're conducting, let's make those at market too. So our recommendations are just kind of to be, you're at market for benefits, and this is how we become at market for the salary ranges in there. So what I wanted to show that I think was a little bit of an interesting finding, and we're starting to see this more and more across the nation in our travels, is each one of these blue dots represents a job that was surveyed. As we go up and down on the y-axis, it's the relationship to market, and then as we go left to right on the x-axis, kind of the horizontal line, that's the midpoint of the job. So the way to say this is to put this into a sentence is, as you go up the food chain at Clearwater, you tend to be more behind market. Okay, so your managers, assistant directors, directors tended to be more behind market than the entry-level positions. Now, what I want to, and that's not necessarily saying that's right or that's wrong or that needs correction. That's a little bit of a factual statement. As you can see in this, is there's still a lot of positions that are lower on the salary schedule, that are a little bit in those lower paying positions that we need to address. We need to pick those positions up. We need to place them onto a higher salary level and respond to the market. And there's a greater number of positions that are behind market, lower down on the food chain, because you just have more positions there. So when we talk about this and we look at some of the implementation options, the majority of spending, the majority of the positions that need adjustment, the majority of the employees that need adjustment are going to fall lower on the salary schedule than on the higher end of the salary schedule. So the majority of the money, the majority of the jobs that are changing are those more entry-level, lower-end paying jobs. Okay. So one of the very first places that we want to start is, now that we know the going rate for a job, now that we have a relatively factual going rate, we want to be able to put those jobs onto a standardized salary schedule. So your current salary schedule is a little bit, kind of the way to say it is there's some history in it. Right? There's not consistent distances between the minimums and maximums. There's not consistent distances between each range. So we designed a salary schedule that has some consistency. We have, when you start to go down, the difference between a range 1 and a range 2 and a range 3 and a range 4, as you go down this salary schedule, it varies by 5%. So the ranges are 5% apart. The range width, so the distance between minimum and maximum is 60%. So it gives an employee a decent amount of earning potential. If we assign you to a range 10, that would mean you can earn between $32,000 all the way up to $51,000. It gives us the ability to hire somebody in, move them through that range, and give them enough earning potential to keep them around, to move them through that range, and get them from minimum to midpoint relatively quickly, and then we can move from midpoint to maximum over a decent amount of time. So we want to have some standardization here. This contains more ranges than I'm showing here on the presentation, but that's just a little bit of kind of administrative notes. But the general idea here is I want to have more ranges to respond to market. When we go out and do this market study, we want to be able to say, all right, should this be a range 18 or a range 19? The more ranges I have when doing that process, the more strategic I can be in response to market, and also the less money it costs. Right? If you envision, if I have really big jumps between these ranges, I have to make very big jumps to get a job into that new range. So having more ranges makes it more affordable to respond to market. All right, and let me just kind of pick an example to look at. We just picked alphabetically by department which ones to take a look at here. So the way to read this, and this is an example of how do we translate the market data into a reality. So if we start all the way on the far side, we can see what the current going rate is of what you're currently paying for that position. And we want to look midpoint to midpoint. We want to say, how do you fall right down the middle of your range? How does the middle of your range compare to the middle of the market rate? So if we just take the job that's there on the bottom, and we see that you're currently paying, that job's in an SB1, you're currently paying about $46,000 for that job at midpoint. The market says the midpoint for that position should be somewhere around $49,000 or a range 13. And you see our recommendation for that job would be to place it in a range 13, which happens to be $48,600, right there to be aligned with market. So envision this exercise times every single job here at the city. And that's what we did. Then we want to make sure, all right, if we have a worker 1, how does that relate to the worker 2? How does it relate to the worker 3? The crew leader, the supervisor, the manager, and up the food chain? How does it relate to other jobs here at the city so that we can make those recommendations? A couple things to note in this is, so far we've only been talking about the job. We haven't been talking about an employee yet. We'll put the employees back into this in a minute. But if the job, let's say we recommend a range increase of 5%, just for kind of nice, easy, standard math. If we say the range needs to move by 5%, that doesn't necessarily mean the employee would see a 5% increase. Right? So I'll say, as much as I can, and when we stood in front of the employees, we said, this is not the process by which everybody gets a raise. don't go buy a new truck because we're standing here today. This is the process by which we strategically address and respond to market. So if we move this range, now we need to put employees back into that scenario. Now we need to make sure we didn't cause compression, that we don't have a 1 year, a 5 year, and a 10-year person all jammed up against minimum, right? If you imagine if I move those ranges a decent amount, and some of the ranges moved what I would consider to be a decent amount. If we move that and now we have everybody at minimum, well, we don't have any room to hire anybody new. Now we have someone who's saying, wait, I've been here for 15 years, and I'm making the same thing as the guy that was hired 15 days ago, right? So now we need to talk about how to move employees through the ranges. Once we place a job onto that new salary schedule, we want to put employees back into that endeavor and look at how they fall. So this is what your picture currently looks like. If I were to take every single employee here at the city and to say, where do you fall inside of your current range? So as we go on the y-axis, as we go up and down, that's the range penetration. So 0 is going to be minimum. They're at the minimum of their range. 100% is going to be there at the maximum of their range. And then as we go on the x-axis, it's their years in that job. Not years with the city, but the years that they've been in that job. And as you can see, we have some people, there's a general slope. You notice, you see how we're moving from minimum up as you go up and to the right. We're moving through that salary range, and that's good. That's what we like to see. But there's a little bit of what I would consider slow movement or compression going on. We have some people that are a little bit lower in the ranges than we would necessarily like them to be. With the range width of 60%, we'd like to see people getting to that midpoint in 10 years. So if you're hired in at minimum, we want to see you on a line, on a trajectory to get to midpoint in 10 years. So if you imagine, if we drew a picture of this again, and we went through this exercise, and we say we want to move you from the minimum to the midpoint in 10 years, here's what it looks like. Okay? So you can see how we've picked up a lot of people. We've shifted a lot of those blue dots to be keeping pace with the movement. We're avoiding creating compression. We're putting people on different ranges, we're moving people through the ranges based on their years in that job so that we can say, here's the going rate for the work. We know we want this to be a range 8. Now that we have a job in the range 8, how much do we want to move that employee through range 8 based on their time in that job? Okay? Before we get into some of the other details, maybe this is a good point for me to pause again. Any questions on that? Any questions on market, new salary schedule, how we place jobs onto that salary schedule, how we move employees through that range?
I guess just for informational purposes, you said you compared it with 13 other organizations. Give me an example of some of the organizations we compared with.
Yeah, so City of Tampa, Pinellas County, just other organizations here in the area. We wanted to be able to answer the question, if you don't sell a house, if you don't pull the kids out of school, if you commute in a different direction, what would they pay you? We also had to pull in some regional comparators because we wanted to know other municipalities in the state of Florida that have gas. That's a limited subsegment. Now we're Gainesville and Tallahassee. So we wanted to have some other comparators like that as well to know what they were doing for some of the other jobs. Because you have some unique jobs that not everybody here in the area does, right? Obviously, if you provide gas to the city next door, and I only looked at the city next door, I couldn't tell you the value of that work. So we had to go a little bit wider for some of those jobs.
Thank you.
Yeah, good question. Sorry I didn't cover that.
Well, that was the list that we had approved.
Yeah, right.
Before.
But I want
Yeah.
One
question. Could you go to the slide right before that one? When Jennifer, when we had our one-on-ones, she used the terminology compression.
Yeah.
Is that what so basically that's entry level or range 1, 2, or 3 that have not moved through 4, 5, 6, 8 to different level. Can that be attributed to just because of our process or how well they perform, or because our problem is compression at those early ranges? Isn't that what that diagram describes right there?
Yes. So the way to say this is when you are in a range 4, just for instance, I'm not talking about putting you into a range 5. I'm talking about moving you off of the minimum of the range 4 and moving you through that range. So an example, if I were to flip back to the salary schedule, if we're just picking on range 4, somebody who's making $24,079 on a range 4 would be shown as being right at the minimum. What I'm talking about is picking them up and moving them in a range 4, moving them closer to that $31,302 midpoint. So we want to move them through that range so that we can hire new people into that range.
Well, if I may, then how did we get jammed up at that range? How is it because of our steps, time between steps?
So it's because of a couple things. When you maintain a salary schedule, when you go and do a COLA every year or you increase the range every year, if you're increasing the range faster than you're moving people through that range, you're going to inadvertently sweep everybody up and cause compression against that minimum. So you can have the best of intentions. You can say, I want to do a COLA. I want to move my ranges by 3%. We're seeing that we're having a hard time hiring for this position, so let's put it in a higher range. And you can inadvertently cause compression by doing that. So we'll talk a little bit about salary administration. We've had this conversation with HR, is that we always want to be moving our people faster than we're moving our ranges. We want to see them gaining on midpoint. We want to see people getting to midpoint in 10 years. And what usually happens then is if we can get people to midpoint quickly, they go out and they start to look at what's the going rate for this work out in the market. If our midpoints are set appropriately, the hiring rate that another city is going to advertise is going to be well below what your midpoint is. So they go out and they say, oh, well, I'm already making more than this. I'm already, right? You kind of, if we move people through these ranges, it makes recruiting and retaining quality staff much easier because the flyer they get is now well below what they're making.
Thank you.
Yeah, no, good questions.
Let's clarify, though. We're not talking about for our, this does not pertain to police and fire.
Correct.
Okay.
Yes.
So currently, our CWA workers do not, we don't have steps per se for them.
That's correct. We do not have.
Correct. Okay. So how, I mean, let's not say that we're getting ready to put steps in now. How do we answer that question?
Yeah, so it becomes a conversation of, as a city, as an organization, what do we value? What metric do we use to move people from minimum to midpoint to maximum? How do we move people through the range? Is it time and job? Is it performance? Is it a combination of both? Right? So we've worked with some organizations that say we want to incentivize those people who we just hired, they're star performing, they get 5s on their performance reviews, they knock it out of the park, they're our top talent, high performing. But they have a program, they have a structure, they have performance reviews in place, they have matrices to do those things. So you can do that. That's salary administration. That's how you maintain this. So that's going forward year after year, next year and after that. We want to put you on the right footing to be able to have those conversations of how do we move people through those ranges. And there's a couple different ways to do that. So you can do it based on time and job. You can do it based on time and job and bring in a performance component. If everybody's doing it well, if it's maintained, if it's done right by the supervisors, you can bring in a performance portion to that. So it's a little bit of how you want to do that going forward. But at least now we're on the right footing. We're structured appropriately. We addressed compression, we addressed market, and now maintaining it is easier and doesn't necessarily cost as much as getting caught up and getting current. Okay. All right, so here are some implementation steps, and essentially kind of what we're here to ask you to empower staff to include in the budget for next year is to say, all right, now that we move those ranges, the very first thing we need to do is get employees to the minimum of the new ranges, right? So envision you are somebody who is just hired, you're on minimum of the old range. We go out and do a market survey. We say, hey, this range was blank percentage behind, I need to shift it. That employee just fell out of the bottom of the range. They're now not even in a range. We need to spend money to increase that employee's salary. We need to pay them more. We need to get them caught up to the minimum of the new range. So that's kind of the first step. So you always need to spend a little bit of money getting people to the minimum of the new range. But that doesn't address compression. That's just step one. So we want to get employees to the minimum of the new range. Then, in addition to that, we want to move you through that new range. So we want to say, all right, here's the going market rate for that work. You should be in a range 4. Got to get you to the minimum of the range 4. Then we're going to look at each individual employee and say, how many years have they been in this job? And we're going to create that line between minimum and midpoint. And if you've been in that job for 5 years, we want you halfway between minimum and midpoint. If you've been in it 10 years, we want you right at midpoint. If you've been in there longer, we're going to slow down that ramp. We don't want to keep that going. I don't want to spend money on you today to max people out, right? We want to be able to say, we want to get to midpoint quickly and then start generally tapering off just a little bit in that. So we want to be able to have a way to say, let's get to midpoint, let's create that line, and let's address compression so we don't have the 1 year, the 5 year, and the 10-year person all stuck on minimum making the same thing. And then third, we want to be, we want to make sure that we're being financially responsible and that there aren't massive increases at some of those higher level positions, right? So if we start talking about percentages, and if we're talking about a range 4, moving through the midpoint to the minimum in a range 4 versus a range 40 is a big dollar amount difference, right? So I can move someone from minimum to midpoint in a range 4 for maybe 8 or 9 grand, where it might be closer to 20 or 30 in some of those higher ranges. So what we want to do is we want to put a cap on spending so that we're not spending a large amount of money that typically falls higher up your salary schedule. We want to put a cap on people who are already making a decent amount or making higher in that salary schedule. So the cap that was put in place to help control costs, to help meet some budget, was to say we want to put a cap on people who are making more than $65,000 and their position was adjusted by less than 8%. So if your position was adjusted by more than 8% and you're earning less than $65,000, we don't have a cap on those people. So if you're a little bit lower in the salary schedule, those more entry-level jobs that are not being paid as much, maybe some of those employees that might fall into that ALICE classification from the previous presentation, some of those employees we're not putting a cap on. But the people who are higher in that food chain, a little bit higher up on the salary schedule, we're putting a cap on that. To essentially control costs so that an individual employee isn't seeing a $15,000 increase as a result of the study. Kind of back to a little bit of what we told all the employees, don't go buy a boat, don't buy a truck as a result of this. We want to make sure that we're controlling spending and that we're not necessarily have a kind of a little bit of a bad spending there. So here are the costs associated with that. If we are aggressive, if we respond, if we move to market and say we want to place these jobs onto the salary schedule based on market, and we want to move employees onto that salary schedule and get caught up to minimum, there's about 400 and some odd employees that would see a salary increase as a result of that. That costs about $600,000 in salaries that would be increased next fiscal year that would go into the budget. Addressing for compression, responding to market, saying we want people to get to minimum or get to midpoint in 10 years, and there's a cap in place. That's an additional about $2.5 million that would be added to the budget for the next fiscal year for about $3.1 million to address and respond to the market. And again, that's not uncommon given our travels. If it's been 15 years or so since a market study has been done, since somebody's looked at compression, that's not an uncommon result to see as a response to a market study. All of that to say, these numbers also, just for perfect clarification, do not include benefit costs. These are just a salary number that's included in that, just so that we're talking apples to apples. Some final thoughts I have on this. Ultimately, now that we know what the market is, we can respond to the market with different options, with different scenarios. We think that this one is appropriate, given that we don't necessarily want to be overly aggressive in how we're responding to market, or we're spending unwisely in some of the responses. If we wanted to be much more aggressive, it would be a lot more expensive, and that's not necessarily good spending that we would see as a result of this. So we can tailor this a little bit to fit the budget, to fit some policy, to fit some realities that exist here at the city. I would also say that we want to go through this, and as much as humanly possible, I'll tell anybody who listens, spend your money on your people, not on me, not on us. You don't need to have us back. We have an implementation support so that we can train HR, and you guys can essentially have us do any work that you need all the way through fall of 2021 without us charging anything. I'm a really big proponent of, if we set this up right, and we leave you on a good footing, you don't need to have us come back and do this every year. You can spend your money on your people where it matters most. And then we want to talk about salary administration. You can move your people faster than you're moving your ranges to avoid getting in a compression situation again. So if you take those 13 organizations that we talked about, if you call them up every year and you have HR call them up and to say, all right, how much did you move your range? How much did you move your people? And if you keep pace with that, you can keep pace with market. And then maybe every 5 to 8 years, you can open up and say, all right, we're having a little bit of trouble hiring in this job. Let's go out and do a market study just for this job. And you can kind of keep pace with what the market's doing. But essentially, asking those two questions allows you to keep pace with the market and respond in a whole in a way that makes sense and is financially appropriate. Okay? So let me pause there. Let me end there. Any questions? Anything I didn't cover? Anything that you may need more clarity about?
Any other questions? Mr. Poglace?
Yes.
Cost of benefits was not added. Is that, what is the cost added with, I mean, because we're not talking about hiring new people, so a lot of these folks already have benefits. And if you suggested our benefits was already good, we're at market rate, so that is the final cost.
Yeah, I'm not entirely sure of what your benefit load is, because there's a percentage you contribute towards some of the retirement programs. Everyone's on a little bit of a different plan, so I didn't want to say that this is absolutely it. It won't cost another penny, because as percentages go up, you contribute a little bit more percentage towards retirement and some things like that. So there's a number that this is in addition to. What that exactly is, I don't have that. Finance may have a little more.
Will we be able?
So 15% is the benefit load.
Okay.
That will be added on top of this.
Okay. So what percentage of employee, there's the numbers there. What percentage of our overall, is that, how many, we have 1,800 employees, I think, is that about right?
We
How
do
many?
have 1,800.
Not including, so what is it without police and
I
fire?
think we were at, what was the census for this work?
So I think it's round about half. So around about half the employees would see something as a result of this. About half wouldn't. So if we look back here, this is kind of a good way to visually get an idea of this. So if we look at all the blue dots, and let me just kind of flip back and forth between these slides, you can kind of see that if you don't fall on that blue line where we have, if I have a mouse here, right? So you see that this line here, if you don't fall below this line, we don't have to adjust you. So all of these people that are up here in this section right now, oops, this mouse doesn't really follow me around. All of these people who are up here in this portion aren't going to see an increase as a result of this. So because they're already far enough into that range, you have some people who are near maximum of their range with 3 or 4 years in that job. That's usually somebody who comes from within the organization and has been here a long time. So we don't need to increase that person's salary to avoid compression. They're already set appropriately, so they wouldn't see anything as a result of this.
So basically, this is based on 900 employees, because the other half are fire and police.
No, I would say it's closer to 1,400.
So it's closer to 1,400?
Correct.
Well, I, for one, was relieved that it was, I thought it would be much worse based on, of course, what you hear from folks. Out of those 1,400 employees, so there's the total, so 1,000, so that's basically 2/3 are going to see an increase.
Yeah, so some of these there's a little bit of overlap between those two numbers, because we could move you to minimum and then need to move you off minimum. So there's some people in the 700 or so that are going to fall that we also spent a little money on to get them caught up to minimum. Then we got to move them off of minimum. So there's some overlap in those two numbers. But kind of a safe number is around about half of the employees would see something as a result of this.
This is basically a 2-year adjustment. This will put us back on track, set a process and strategy going forward to hopefully not be in a compression situation, because 600,000 first year, 2.5 million the next year, and then, or
No,
no, not.
it's combined. So the proposal is to do both of these on 10/1,
Right.
for implementation
Okay.
for 10/1.
So this would, yeah, so this would be implementation 10/1, both of these numbers that year.
Okay. Okay.
That's the motion.
Yeah, no.
And there's a slide for that.
Okay, I didn't know whether you had a
That's-
question. Okay.
I'm good on questions.
Any
Anybody
other-
else? Yeah.
So we're looking at a $3.1 million of the budget that would be earmarked to implement this program. And
For
so,
next-
With benefits.
next
of-
Plus
for next, yeah, for
Right. Yeah.
fiscal year.
So that staff would
Right.
go back and add that to the budget that will be presented to go into effect as of October 1st.
Right. And let's go back to another key point, just so that we are all understanding. Not everybody who is working for the city will see that adjustment effective October 2019.
Right, yeah, so the people who would see an adjustment would be people who might be needing to be brought to minimum of their new range or moved through their new range to avoid compression. Like we said, there's a lot of people who wouldn't see movement as a result of this. And we want to be able to communicate with employees, so we have some draft letters that are going to tell the employees exactly what fits them. Kind of, if this goes into effect, here's what this would look like for you. Here was your job title before. Here's your job title now. Here's what your salary range was before. Here's what it is now. Kind of, here's how this impacts you. But, we don't want to get out in front of council or budget or the bargaining process to communicate to that to the employees. But we want to be able to be upfront and communicative with the employees to say, here's what it looks like if it goes into effect on it.
Can you go back to your blue dots a second?
Yes. It's a good slide, right? The blue
Yeah.
dot slide? I like it. It's one of my favorite ones.
Okay,
Yes.
so if you're in the top, what I would call left-hand
Uh-huh.
corner,
Yes,
you would not be impacted.
correct.
Okay.
Yes.
So go back to the 1,100 number, the 347 and the, yes, the 377.
Yeah.
So of the employees that fall into this category on that blue chart, roughly 1,100.
Yeah, it's actually going to be less than that because you can't
Right.
you can't just add those two. I'd say it's closer to 800 than it is to 1,100.
Okay,
Yeah.
so of the 800, that's 800 of 1,400.
That's correct.
So that would be 600 employees. Go back to your blue chart again,
Yes.
or blue dots,
They're above the line.
are above the
Yes.
line. And that's why they would not be impacted. Okay.
Yep. So we went through the analysis and said, what's the going rate for this work? We need to place you onto a range 10 or range 8 or range 4 or whatever it is. Okay. Now that we know this job should be in a range 4, how fast should we move from minimum to midpoint to maximum? You are now above that pace. You're good. We don't need to spend money on that position. You are already ahead of the pace that we need to set. We don't spend money on that position for a salary study. That's COLA. That's bargaining. That's the process by which all salaries go up. That's the rising tide that floats all boats. That's different than this study. Right.
But it also doesn't, what I want our employees to understand is that we're trying to benefit those who are at the low end, that we appreciate all of them.
Yes.
Okay? We don't take their work for granted.
Right.
Okay? But in terms of trying to bring some equality to those who've been at the low end,
Right.
to try to help them out initially, and then down the road, everybody would benefit.
Yes.
And I think that's what we're aiming to do.
Yes.
Is that fair? Okay.
No, I think that's a good way to say it, right? There's positions that don't need adjustment. There's some people that you're paying appropriately. We want to spend money. We want to go after the areas where we're behind market. We want to go after the people who we're not paying appropriately, and this is what that's to address.
Mr. Albrecht?
Yeah, my concern was always, are we at market for our employees? And I've heard for a while that we were getting people that would leave to go other places, whether they were going up, with the ladder, or whether they were just going other places.
Laterally, right?
So this is a good thing. I'm glad we did this study. But let me just reiterate a couple of things here, just so I understand in my mind.
Yes.
The spread is a 60% spread.
Yes, distance between minimum and maximum.
Okay, now, I understood that you were trying to bring the people that have been employees for a while that haven't hit the midpoint. So you're bringing them up to midpoint.
Yes.
Okay, but then on the other slide, I saw that you had a thing that said midpoint within 10 years.
Yes. So that's the line, right? So if you envision this blue graph again, we have to set a pace. How long should it take us to get to midpoint? The more aggressive we are in getting to midpoint, if you set a policy to say we want everyone at midpoint in 2 years, right? That would be insanely expensive. Nobody does that at all. But we have to pick a rate that we get to midpoint in 10 years so that we can say, all right, you have 5 years. We want you halfway between minimum and midpoint so that we can create that line. 10 years is a good, I would say, an appropriate amount of time given the range width. To say we want to get to midpoint in 10 years, I think that's a healthy number.
Okay, so it's really up to HR to follow each employee to see how they're progressing through to meet this particular
Yes.
graph there.
Yep. Yeah, and then that comes back to saying, how do we want to do this in years going forward? How do we address this? How do we maintain this? How do we respond to that? What kind of increases do we need to do each year to keep pace with that? If I move the ranges by this much, I have to now move the people, right? So now we're talking salary administration that gets to happen in the next years that we obviously assist with at no cost, just as part of this study. But this gets us on the right footing so we can have that conversation. Without being able to say, here's the going rate for this work out in the market, we need to place this on a range 8. Without knowing that it needs to be in a range 8, it's hard to know how much to move people through that range if the range is a little bit arbitrary.
But we need to be competitive with other places,
Yes.
so I like your idea of giving them a call and seeing where they fall.
Yeah. Well, and it's nice. I mean, it's nice to be able to say this information's available, right? You kind of ask nice at first, hey, I'm so-and-so, we want to do this, and no, okay, freedom of information request. Like, the information's out there, it's available, and knowing exactly what to ask for, how much are you moving your ranges, how much are you moving your people, allows you to keep pace with that so that you don't have to pay somebody to do it.
Any other questions, council? Mr. Kondo?
Sir, is this only full-time employees?
Well, there'll be some part-time employees as well that are in some of these positions. So you might have some part-time employees who are in these positions that fall onto that new salary schedule that would be affected. So whether you're full-time or whether you're part-time, the going rate is a range 4.
We do have some permanent part-time positions that are going to be covered.
Favorite term, permanent part-time. Yeah.
They can't ever leave.
Right, exactly.
Mr. Hamilton?
Jill just said you can never leave. Well, why are you leaving?
No. She's not permanent.
Oh, okay.
She's not permanent part-time.
I just had to, I'm sorry, I couldn't let it. No, my question would be for the city manager. I mean, $3.1 million going directly, and we all know that, salaries and benefits is eats up the lion's share of our annual budget anyways. What's, just off the top of your head, what's the hit? What kind of hit does that create for you? It can't cause you to lose more hair, but.
Well, we factor that into our analysis going forward. Jay's gonna.
We're gonna hear that from Jay as well.
Yeah.
I mean, we had this study done for a reason, to get us into the position where we know where we are and where we want to get to, and create a roadmap for getting there. So I see no reason not to go with these recommendations. And I guess, do I need to put that in the form of a motion?
Before we do that, we're going to take a recess and then have public comment, and then we'll have the motion, because this is the one item that we are, the purpose of the meeting.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay?
All right.
So we will take a recess until 4:15.
Okay, thank you.
Convene our special meeting of May the 14th. We're on agenda item 3.4, and we would need is there anybody from the public wishing to speak to agenda item 3.4?
You mean 3.5?
3.5. Anybody from the public speak to agenda item 3.5? Motion?
I would make a motion to accept the recommendations of the consultant and the study and implement it into the budget for the upcoming year.
Second.
Motion has been made and seconded to approve agenda item 3.4 and implement the PSPC classification and compensation study. Comments, council? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Motion carries unanimously. Agenda item 3.6, Mr. Horn.
Mayor, thank you very much for that previous vote. Now we're going to have a financial forecast given by our finance director, Jay Ravens.
Good afternoon, Mayor and Council. This is a brief update on financial forecasts for the various city funds. Yesterday at Council Work Session, the auditors presented you with the September 30th, 2018 Comprehensive Annual Financial Report, or CAFR. The CAFR financials reflected that all of the city's enterprise and internal service funds continue to be self-supporting with no need for subsidies from the general fund. All have maintained reserve levels at or above required policy levels. Rate studies for the water and sewer, stormwater, and solid waste and recycling utilities are currently underway. You will be presented with the results of these studies, along with any related rate changes in the coming months. A rate study for the gas utility is planned for the fall. At this time, I'd like to review the general fund with you. Appearing on the screen is an updated general fund forecast. Try to get this a little easier to follow here. This is the forecast from last year's financial feasibility study conducted by Stantec that's been updated for actual fiscal 2018 results, along with current estimates for several significant new expenditures highlighted in blue that were not included in last year's study. Please draw your attention again to the blue shaded items. The first row, titled Compensation and Class Study Implementation, includes the costs of implementation of the compensation and classification study as proposed. These are the general fund costs, including 15% benefits. The implementation cost for year one for the general fund alone is estimated at $1.573 million, increasing at 4% per year thereafter. The next two blue shaded rows include costs related to our current and proposed operating agreements with the Phillies. The first line is the estimated current annual net subsidy per the existing agreement. The second Phillies line is additional net operating costs per the terms of the proposed renewal agreement. If the renewal agreement requires new negotiations, these costs could change. The last three blue shaded rows relate to estimated Imagine Clearwater costs. The first row is per the pro forma that staff previously presented to you, prepared in conjunction with the consultant. The next row is used to reduce these costs by estimated net cost already included in the previous general fund forecast by the rate study consultant per estimates provided by Parks and Rec. Finally, the last row is annual debt service on an estimated $45 million of external and or internal borrowing for Imagine Clearwater capital needs. This amount will be dependent upon council decisions regarding allocation of penny for Pinellas funding for Imagine Clearwater, along with the final total cost of all Imagine Clearwater components. Bear with me as I get the right chart pulled up here. The forecast indicates that general fund reserves will fall below the required 8.5% minimum in fiscal 2027. As seen at the bottom of the chart, the blue fund balance falling below the red line representing minimum reserves. A millage increase of 0.54 mils in fiscal 2027 would be necessary to maintain reserves above the minimum levels for the forecast period. The good news is that we have from now until fiscal 2027 to address this potential millage increase in an attempt to reduce the amount of the increase and/or the timing of the increase. But these major projects and initiatives have a significant impact on the general fund budget that must be recognized and addressed to the degree possible. Happy to answer any questions.
Any questions for staff on agenda item 3.6? Mr. Poglace.
Thank you, Mayor. So that 2027 timeline, when we would have to consider a 0.54 millage increase, only covers us for 2 years until we fall below the general reserves again. That 8%, is that correct? In 29?
In 2029, we are still at, but you're right, by 2030, we'd be back facing a potential millage increase again.
So do we have, what's your plan? Do you have any recommendations?
Well, the plan, the reality is, in conjunction with the rate study consultant for the general fund forecast, I think they would probably recommend larger than a 0.54 millage increase just for the fact that you elaborated. It just gets you through the 10-year period. By the time we get to 2027, we don't want a 3-year fix. We would want a longer-term fix. So, but this is just for illustration purposes because there's a lot of factors that are going to change that number between now and then, either for the better or for the worse. And so that's the value of doing a 10-year forecast is we don't have an immediate problem.
Our tax base could get up, real estate property, and there's a lot of different things, whether it's Imagine Clearwater, the benefits of a successful initiative, how this is all going to play out with the, there's a lot of different variables that I think come into play within a 10-year period.
Correct.
Mr. Albright.
Well, I think you just answered the question. There is going to be a lot of variables over 10 years, and if we're steering things the right way, I think we could probably, I mean, I'm looking at the chart, the red and the green. Could you explain that? Because I can...
Basically, the red is expenditures, the green is revenues.
Revenues.
Yeah.
So we just need to figure out how to get the revenues up over that time frame.
Or the expenditures down.
And the expenditures down. Exactly.
Or a combination of the two.
Any other questions, Council? Again, just to remind ourselves, when we approved the millage increase last year, we were working on a 10-year projection. Why we're now looking at 8 years out is because of the compensation proposal that we looked at, right?
That is one factor.
That was the factor, and the Imagine Clearwater debt.
And the fillers. It's the items Jay highlighted for you.
Yes.
Right, but last year when we did the millage increase, we didn't have the numbers for the blue shaded areas. Is what I'm getting.
We had some of the numbers.
We had some of the numbers.
We had the current Phillies cost. We didn't
right.
have the new cost.
We didn't have the new cost. Right. Yeah. And so that's why we're gone from 10 years to 8 years now.
Yes.
And, conceivably all the variables that come into play, we just don't know how they're going to play out. But talk to us, and I don't know if Mr. Dunbar is still here or not, But talk to us a little bit about this new Phillies agreement and why we're looking at another 1.1 million so that we can understand what this is for.
Good afternoon, Kevin Dunbar, Director of Parks and Recreation. I don't have all my papers in front of me, but new facilities and then cost over that period of time is kind of where that gets us to.
So we're assuming the cost of these new facilities, the operating cost of the new facilities?
The way the term sheet was structured is basically the same program that we have in place now on the facilities. So the areas of where the city had its responsibilities and then the team had their responsibilities, it's extrapolating that out because there'll be some new areas, not just at the Carpenter Complex, but at the stadium. I'll give you an example, utility costs. At the stadium, the city covers 75% of that. At the Carpenter Complex, the city covers 100% of that. So if you expand with new facilities, you're going to have increased costs.
Okay, but Mr. Ravens, I think, said that there's a possibility we may have to renegotiate that term sheet.
Well, we have a current term sheet, but we have not done a use agreement yet. Nor have we done a development agreement yet. Okay. That'll be actually your final document, so that's all part of, the ability to have a continued conversation on that.
Okay, so those numbers could be adjusted possibly.
Correct, just like we don't know what we're gonna necessarily build, right? Because we're still working through that, so.
Okay, just wanted to make sure that we understood that, okay. Any other questions, council? All right. Mr. Ravens, did you have anything further for us?
No, I did not.
Okay. Agenda item 3.7. Council, I had asked that this be placed for us to consider because of the fact that we found out late yesterday afternoon that the services and the memorial service for Mr. Montgomery in Philadelphia is going to be on Thursday, June the 6th. I didn't know, I was obviously planning on going up, so I would be missing that meeting. I didn't know if any of y'all were planning on going, and if so, then that would only leave, 2 or 3 people here. I think Mr. Horn is going to be traveling on other business on June the 6th. So the question is, if y'all have an interest in attending the service in Philadelphia on that Thursday, then, would you want to move the meeting so that more than just I would be attending?
I think it would be a good thing either to move the date of the meeting, or I talked with city manager earlier about possibly just making it a later meeting, maybe an hour later, if it's a up and back flight in the same day.
The service is at 3 o'clock in the afternoon.
Oh. Yeah, I didn't know that.
Yeah, it's at 3 o'clock in the afternoon. What I had heard, and Mr. Dunbar may be able to clarify, that is the draft day, and the family and the Phillies thought that it would be appropriate to hold the memorial service at the stadium after the draft was completed.
Yes, one of Mr. Montgomery's favorite things was the draft, because it always started the new replenishment of talent. So that was the end of the draft, so they thought that was an appropriate day. Also, the team has an off day,
right,
and they expect that the team will be there. Plus the fact that it is the draft, they'll have a lot of staff that will be in town as part of the draft that would want to be part of that public celebration. So you kind of factor all those in.
Yep.
That's where the date came from.
So that's the 3 o'clock.
Yeah.
The earliest flight back, I think, is at 9 o'clock at night. So that,
Well, I have no problem moving.
Because you figure you're going to have whatever it's going to be, it'll probably be 5:30, 6 o'clock would be what time you'd be probably clear to start heading back.
2.5 hours. So I would need a motion to move the date from June the 6th to June the 5th.
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded. Anybody from the public to speak to this motion? Any other comments, council?
Yeah, well,
Mr. Hamilton?
the only comment I have, my intent, knowing Mr. Montgomery's condition for a long time, and I've dealt with Mr. Montgomery for a long time. I mean, he gave me a hard time about falling through the old stadium and everything else, so go way back. I had planned on, whenever the time came, I had planned on, going up for the service. When the Phillies announced it was going to be on the day of the meeting, I said, well, I guess I'm not going to make it, but if we're going to move the meeting, I would have every intention of being there.
Okay. All right, motion's been made and seconded. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Motion carries unanimously. Council, I'm going to ask for permission to go back to citizens to be heard. Obviously, there was some confusion on the parts of some people that they could talk on all parts of this meeting. These were reports that were being presented to us. But if anybody from the public wishes to speak on something that is not on the agenda, I would, and it's your, with your approval to ask for
Not on the agenda, or that was on the agenda?
Well, it wasn't on the agenda, but there was some confusion that there were votes going to be taken, and they may not have spoken at the appropriate time when we called for it. So
I have no problem.
Okay, so that's why I'm asking if that's okay, and if anybody from the public wishes to speak to something, now you would have 3 minutes, provided that you have a card presented.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Appreciate that accommodation. Council, yes, I was confused as to when was the appropriate time to make these comments. The comments that I have were relating to the strategic planning process that you were beginning today. Perhaps you've not completed that. I'd like to commend the council and the manager for the better organization of the agenda items. Last year, perhaps unintentionally, the strategic priorities were deleted prior to publishing the budget plan. I look for the outcome of the process that you've started today to also be the identification of a few goals to be accomplished in the next 12 months. I reviewed the proposed focus areas and have the following comments. I didn't see a focus area for the resiliency to accompany the cities joining the Regional Planning Council and Surrounding Communities Compact. It seemed like really a big priority. Under Imagine Clearwater, I would suggest the establishment of the Conservancy and initiating more of the HRNA recommended building the brand activities. I would also suggest that by the end of the next 12 months, there should be a Second Century Phase 1 project schedule and a financial plan to accompany that. Last year, the Clearwater Neighborhood Coalition encouraged the inclusion of a neighborhood development goal. I would repeat that request. During this last year, much progress has been made in the Lake Bellevue area. I think Ms. Silverboard has been very involved in that. Other parts of the city could similarly benefit. Under the quality strategy, there is an objective to continuously measure and improve our performance. This is one of the 5 International City Manager Association benefits of having a professional manager. And we just recently confirmed that we wanted to have a professional manager. This activity in Clearwater isn't very visible, especially with the latter agenda item looking at a millage increase. So it would seem important to address. Those are my comments. Thank you for allowing me to speak.
Anybody else from the public wishing to speak on these items? If not, we will remind everybody that our council meeting will be on Thursday, May the 16th at 6 o'clock. Thank you, council, for the time that you've given. We've had 2 long meetings, and we've got 1 more on Thursday. I appreciate your time. Thank you to the staff who's been here all day, too. We're adjourned.